Welcome, curious learners, to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
So, what happens when a really high profile, bromance between two world leaders just unravels, not over years, but like in a matter of months?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. And the implications, well, they ripple outwards, don't they? Especially for global power dynamics.
Absolutely. And this deep dive, it's really about how pure transactionalism, even when you think there's a strong friendship, can just erode strategic trust faster than you'd think.
It's a critical lesson, especially when we're talking about, the world's largest democracy, India, and the oldest, the U.S. The fallout matters.
It really does. So today we're taking that deep dive into the surprisingly swift breakdown in relations between India and the U.S. in 2025, specifically under Prime Minister Modi and President Trump.
Right. A relationship that went from being hailed as a mega partnership to, well, some are calling it a transactional cold shoulder. Quite the swing.
It is. And this wasn't just talk, was it?
No, not at all. This shift genuinely led India to visibly recalibrate its global strategy.
So our mission today is to really unpack the specific events, the economic stuff, the deeper geopolitical ideas behind it all.
Exactly. To help you understand what happened, why it happened, and what it signals for this increasingly multipolar world we're in.
Okay, let's get into it. If we think back to late 2024, the vibe between Modi and Trump, it seemed genuinely warm, right?
Oh, definitely. After Trump's election win, November 6th, I think it was,
Huh.
Modi tweeted almost immediately, "Heartiest congratulations, my friend Donald Trump." Very personal.
And Trump responded in kind, didn't he? The next day, saying something like, "Whole world loves Modi."
He did.
Yeah.
It really felt like they were betting on that personal chemistry, like a continuation of things like that big Howdy Modi rally in Houston back in 2019.
Yeah.
Sort of visible symbol of the bond.
Yeah, that makes sense. And even into early 2025, like mid-February, after Modi visited Washington, he was still talking up this U.S.-India mega partnership.
Mm-hmm. There was this real feeling, this expectation that the personal rapport, the so-called bromance, would keep things solid.
But then, almost right away, the cracks started showing up. And fast.
They really did. I think the first sort of public shock for India came just a few months after the election, February 5th, 2025.
What happened then?
A U.S. military plane landed in Punjab carrying deported Indian nationals. Someone called it a Canada moment for India.
A Canada moment? Meaning?
Meaning like a sudden jarring realization that they weren't exempt, that they could be
Wow.
subject to the same pretty aggressive tactics Trump had used elsewhere, even with partners. A real shock.
And it wasn't just one plane, was it? The numbers grew quickly.
That's right. By late May, India was reporting over 1,000 of its citizens deported from the U.S. just since January.
Wow. So over 1,000 in just 5 months. That signals a clear policy shift, not just isolated incidents. Very assertive.
Definitely assertive. And something India clearly hadn't fully anticipated, despite the America First rhetoric.
And then this wasn't the only friction point early on, right? Modi's February visit. You mentioned he hailed the partnership, but did he actually get anything concrete out of it?
Well, that's the thing. Despite hopes of, reviving that bromance, the reports say he left Washington empty-handed.
Empty-handed. Why?
Because on February 14th, the same day he was talking partnership, Trump apparently doubled down on tariffs.
Ouch. So warm words, but cold economic reality.
Exactly. It was a very early, very stark sign that personal feelings weren't going to trump, pardon the pun, the transactional approach. America first meant America first, even with friends.
So the warmth was superficial, perhaps. The economic bite was real and immediate.
It certainly looks that way. It signaled a fundamental shift in how the relationship was going to operate under Trump's second term.
And then things escalated further, didn't they? There was this whole episode involving a military operation.
Ah, yes, the ceasefire episode. This was probably the major rupture of trust.
Okay, break this down for us. India launched something called Operation Sindoor.
Correct. Early June 2025. India described it as a limited but high-visibility military action on its western border. A targeted counter-terror response was the official line.
Okay, limited action, counterterror. Sounds fairly standard, maybe. But then President Trump got involved.
He did. Starting back in May, actually, he began publicly suggesting the U.S. had been instrumental in pressuring both India and Pakistan into restraint during recent tensions.
Suggesting he was the peacemaker?
Pretty much. He openly boasted about having secured a ceasefire between them, which, by the way, Delhi sources quickly, though maybe not too loudly, dismissed as an exaggeration.
Okay, so Trump's claiming credit. How did that lead to a rupture?
It culminated in this phone call, June 17th, 2025. between Modi and Trump. And according to the New York Times, it got pretty awkward.
Awkward how?
Well, the report says Trump repeatedly claimed credit for stopping a bigger conflict. And then, allegedly, he asked Modi to publicly acknowledge his role.
He asked Modi to publicly thank him.
Essentially, yes. And it gets better. He apparently even floated the idea of Modi supporting him for a Nobel Peace Prize.
A Nobel Peace Prize. Wow, okay. That's bold.
Bold is one word for it. Modi, understandably, refused to endorse this narrative publicly.
And that refusal, that's what caused the break.
That seems to be the inflection point. Modi's refusal reportedly hardened Trump's mood. Analysts pinpoint that call as when the personal rapport began to fray.
So the personal chemistry, the bromance, hit a wall.
Definitely. Indian officials were diplomatic, hinting at unnecessary self-congratulations, straining things, but the damage was done.
And this wasn't just about egos, right? For Modi, this had domestic political implications.
Absolutely. It created real domestic political unease. Critics jumped on it, accusing Modi of allowing India's sovereignty to be undermined by Washington's narrative. It made him look weak, or at least not fully in control.
Right, because for India, maintaining control over its own security narrative, especially regarding Pakistan, is paramount.
Exactly. And this wasn't, a one-off. It fit a pattern, some argued, of Trump disregarding India's core sensitivities.
Like what else?
Like his repeated offers to mediate the Kashmir dispute, a total non-starter for India, which sees it as purely internal. Or hosting Pakistan's army chief, General Munir, which also raised eyebrows in Delhi.
So it felt like a deliberate, or at least careless, undermining of India's position.
One expert, Dr. Ashok Sharma, even called it a reverse Nixon move against India.
A reverse Nixon, meaning?
Meaning a fundamental strategic shift, but instead of wooing an adversary like Nixon did with China, Trump seemed to be alienating a key partner, India. A pretty dramatic comparison.
Okay, so the diplomatic trust is eroding fast. Then came the tariff tantrums, as you called them. The economic pressure ramped up.
It really did. After the ceasefire episode, things turned economic fast. On April 2nd, India had said it was just examining the implications of potential tariffs. Sounded cautious.
But it didn't stay cautious for long.
Not at all. By July 31st, Trump uses Truth Social, his platform, to announce 25% tariffs on Indian imports.
And what was his justification?
He cited high trade barriers in India, but also explicitly mentioned India's continued defense and energy ties with Russia, linking trade directly to geopolitics.
And then it got worse.
Yeah. Just a week later, August 7th, he orders the tariff hike to go up to 50%. 50%. Specifically citing India buying Russian oil.
50% tariffs tied directly to Russian oil purchases. That's not a subtle message.
Not subtle at all. By August 27th, it was official. Washington formally imposed up to 50% tariffs on a wide range of Indian goods.
How did India react? How did businesses react?
Well, reports said it stunned Indian exporters, and it completely undercut years of lobbying by American companies, actually.
How so?
Because those U.S. businesses had been pushing India as this great China plus one destination, a place to diversify manufacturing away from China. These tariffs suddenly made India look much less attractive, much riskier.
Right, undermining their own business interests in a way. What about specific industries?
Everything from textiles and pharmaceuticals to steel and even IT services saw immediate cost spikes. It hit broadly.
And the Indian government's response?
Officials called the decision unjustified. They pointed out, look, our trade surplus with the U.S. is way smaller than China's. And hey, we buy a lot of American stuff too. Planes, defense equipment.
I'd argue fairness, basically.
Right. But the narrative from diplomats started shifting to this idea of the sinking boat of trade. It was clear that economic leverage was being applied very, very forcefully.
It really does sound like using trade as a weapon, directly disrupting India's economic ambition.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Russian oil earlier. That brings us neatly to the kind of unspoken but really powerful drivers behind all this, oil and arms. And India's history with Russia.
Energy seems key here.
It really does. As one source put it, energy has been the unspoken driver of this shift. Remember, after 2022 and the sanctions on Russia.
Yeah, Russia needed new buyers for its oil.
Exactly. And India and China stepped up big time, buying discounted Russian crudes. By mid-2025, apparently, discounted Russian oil accounted for nearly 40% of India's crude imports.
40%? That's huge. Why was that so important for India?
Crucial for keeping inflation in check domestically and keeping their refineries running full tilt. It was an economic necessity for them.
And India wasn't shy about defending this, were they?
No. India's petroleum minister basically said, we will buy where our people's needs are met. Very direct, a pragmatic stance.
But from Washington's view,
Washington saw it as undermining sanctions against Russia. A direct conflict right there. They wanted India to cut back, and India felt it couldn't or wouldn't.
okay, so oil is a major friction point. What about the arms relationship? That goes way back too, right?
It does, decades back. Something like 70% of India's current military inventory is of Russian or Soviet origin. It's deeply embedded.
70%, wow.
And it's not just buying off-the-shelf stuff. Moscow co-develops and co-produces high-leverage strategic technologies with India. That's a level of partnership you don't often see from, say, Western suppliers.
Can you give an example?
The S-400 Triumph air defense system is the big one recently. India had wanted it since 2015, signed the $5.4 billion deal in 2018, and delivery started in 2021, despite some delays due to the Ukraine war.
And this system, it actually saw action.
Apparently so. Reports claim that in recent clashes with Pakistan, the S-400 proved its unparalleled capabilities, successfully keeping Pakistani jets away, even shooting down several fighters, one from a claimed record distance of 300 kilometers.
So for India, seeing that performance must have really validated their decision to buy Russian.
You'd have to assume so. It reinforces their belief in the technology and likely strengthens their resolve to get more, despite U.S. pressure.
Now, the U.S. had warned India about buying the S-400 before, right? Under the CAATSA sanctions law.
They had. But initially, they granted India some leniency, probably, as you said, seeing India as that vital counterweight to China.
But then Trump's administration shifted tack.
Exactly. Suddenly, the focus wasn't on the S-400 purchase itself, which could have triggered CAATSA. Instead, they threatened sanctions specifically over the oil imports. A different pressure point.
Which brings us back to India's core principle.
Strategic autonomy.
Right.
This U.S. pressure directly challenged that. India's response seems to be sticking to its dual-track approach, developing its own systems, like Project Kusha for air defense, but also continuing Russian imports.
Sending a message.
A clear message. National security decisions will not be dictated by external powers. They want flexibility, the ability to work with multiple partners, not be forced into choosing sides.
Okay, so with all this pressure, diplomatic snubs, economic tariffs, friction over Russia, how did India visibly respond on the world stage?
They recalibrated. And perhaps the clearest sign of this was the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO Summit in Tianjin. That was September 1st, 2025.
So that includes Russia and China, right?
It does. And at that summit, PM Modi held prominent bilateral meetings with both Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. The focus was all on long-term ties and regional cooperation.
And there's some notable imagery, too.
Oh, yeah. The pictures of PM Modi riding with Putin in his Urus limousine after the summit, that wasn't accidental. It was described as a gesture of camaraderie choreographed for the cameras.
So after weeks of getting hammered by U.S. tariffs.
Exactly. New Delhi was visibly embracing Moscow and engaging China in a multilateral setting. A very clear signal back to Washington.
Now, we need to be careful here. This wasn't India suddenly flipping entirely into a Russia-China camp, was it?
No, that's a crucial distinction. Analysts stress it's not a wholesale pivot. India still has major unresolved security tensions with Beijing. Think about the 2020 Galwan clashes, the ongoing mistrust along the LAC border. That hasn't gone away.
So it's more nuanced than just switching sides.
Much more. It's better described as a willingness to publicly hedge, to show Washington, hey, we have other options, other partners we can work with.
And this hedging, it was partly a direct response to Trump's approach.
It seems so. His America First posture appears to be accelerating this adjustment in Indian thinking. The perceived lesson for India was maybe that relying too heavily on the U.S., especially an unpredictable U.S., was risky, and that trying to counter China only with U.S. help wasn't sustainable.
Interesting. Some experts frame this slightly differently, don't they? Seeing the Russia relationship as a strategic asset for India.
Yes. Zorawardali Singh, for example, argued that the India-Russia relations are still vital because they act as a geopolitical stabilizer. And importantly, they give Delhi immense leverage in its dealings with other powers, including the West and China.
So maintaining the Russia tie isn't just nostalgia, it's about current leverage.
Precisely. And this whole recalibration, this messaging, it's seen as an emphatic vote for a multipolar world. India asserting its desire to be a major power on its own terms, navigating between different poles.
Let's bring in some other expert perspectives. John Bolton, Trump's former national security advisor, had some pretty strong words about this whole situation.
He really did. He stated flatly that Trump's personal rapport with PM Modi gone now. And crucially, he added that having a good personal relationship with Trump won't protect you from the worst.
A stark warning. Did he comment on the tariffs specifically?
Yes, he called Trump's tariff policy an unforced error. He argued it has set U.S.-India relations back decades and directly pushed Modi closer to Russia and China.
So, in Bolton's view, it actively damaged U.S. strategic interests.
Completely. He felt it reversed years of bipartisan U.S. efforts aimed at weaning India away from its old ties with Moscow and getting Delhi to focus squarely on China as its main security challenge. A major strategic setback, according to Bolton.
Which brings us back again to India's core foreign policy idea.
Strategic autonomy. It's the thread running through all of this. Their policy is based on cultivating relationships with relevant actors beyond geopolitical polarization, not getting locked into one camp.
They want that multipolar world you mentioned.
Exactly, where power is more spread out. That allows India, theoretically, more room to maneuver and pursue its own rise by leveraging different relationships and exploiting rivalries where necessary. The events of 2025 really put that theory into practice.
So looking back at 2025, the Trump-Modi story really does feel like a case study in how transactionalism can undermine strategic trust.
Absolutely. What started with all that bromance talk ended up looking like a very fragile arrangement tested by ego, tariffs, and oil. Trust eroded quickly when perceived national interests clashed.
And the impact went beyond diplomacy, hitting global business too.
Definitely. That whole China plus one strategy we talked about, it took a real hit. U.S. tariffs suddenly made Indian exports less competitive, forcing companies globally to rethink where they wanted to invest and manufacture. The ripple effects were significant.
Okay, let's try and summarize. We've traced how this Trump-Modi bromance pretty rapidly deteriorated throughout 2025.
Driven by a mix of things. The deportations, the arguments over that ceasefire claim, and especially those hefty tariff hikes linked directly to India buying Russian oil.
And this very transactional, almost punitive approach from Washington pushed India to visibly double down on its long-held policy of
Strategic autonomy, leading them to publicly engage more with Russia and China at a really critical moment.
Now, looking ahead, is there any chance of things cooling down?
Well, there are some signs that Trump's tariff fury might have eased a bit after that SKO summit in Tianjin, perhaps signaling some space for a reset.
But the damage is done.
The events of 2025 have definitely left its mark. India seems more willing than before to be seen with Moscow and Beijing. And maybe Washington learned a lesson, too, that economic pressure on a major player like India, Asia's key swing state, can seriously backfire.
It's such a complex dance. So, wrapping up, what really stands out to you from all this?
I think it's the fragility of trust, even between democracies, when core interests and leadership styles clash so directly.
Yeah. And if the world's largest democracy and its oldest democracy struggle like this to maintain strategic trust, what does that signal for other alliances, other partnerships around the world?
It's a big question. And how might India's demonstrated ability for this kind of multi-alignment, working with different, even rival powers simultaneously, how might that reshape what other countries expect or attempt in the future? Who stands with whom might become a lot more fluid.
Definitely food for thought. Something for all of us to keep watching.
Absolutely. The lessons here go way beyond just U.S.-India relations. It's about the changing nature of global power itself.
Well, thank you for breaking that all down for us. And thank you, listeners, for joining us on the deep dive. We'll catch you next time.